Now, I would like to pause to speculate on if Alice is physically leaving reality or if it's something that's all in her head. After all, multiple times when a memory ended, she found herself in a more sleep-like position. So I feel like going into a magically induced sleep in a strange place in the middle of a snowstorm is probably not the best idea. Hello and welcome to Quotation Points Video Snark. If you came here because you thought that this was an audiobook, please stick around and maybe learn some reading and listening comprehension skills. I read books, discuss what went wrong and how they can possibly be fixed. I'm continuing my read-through of The Looking Glass Illusion by Sara Ella. Not the first video, go check out the others, links are posted below. Chapter 9. With the power of Wonderland magic, the girls transformed the random raw ingredients they gathered into an actual meal, which, sure, why not? They then press onward. As they go, Alice wonders if they'll remain in the pawn position forever, if there are rooks and knights and such further on in the trail, and more importantly, if there are, then if they'll be friend or foe. Then they get to a four-way intersection, and nobody knows which direction to go in. Alice wonders if going on the actual path is the correct choice, when going off-path had been the solution to the start of the trial earlier. But that tumbles her down the entire what if that's what Scarlet went in the first place. Maybe we ought to wait here for someone to find us. That's your brilliant plan? Willow stands above me, hands planted on her curvy hips. Do nothing? Full offense, but that's been Alice's MO this entire book. She wanted to go to Wonderland, but never once actually wanted to try and find it on her own. Even in the trial, somebody else was always pushing her along. So obviously she's going to sit there and wait for somebody to shove her back into action again. Of course, I'd hope that Sophia and Willow would be the ones who would prod Alice into position, but I think I mentioned in this previous chapter, but they're basically flesh-shaped blobs at this point. I'm not even sure that it's enough to prop Alice up. I shrugged, not wanting to deal with her constant need to challenge and push me past my limits. Bitterness creeps in slow and fickle. Why couldn't Maddie or Chess have found me? Why is it that Alice is bitter with the thought of Willow demanding that Alice not sit down and give up, but at the same time wanted it to be Maddie or Chess telling her the exact same thing Willow is doing? Oh, that's right. The difference is that Maddie is a secondary female lead and Chess is the male lead. Willow and Sophia could have been written out and nothing about this series would have changed. However, sitting around and doing nothing isn't exactly what anybody would call an exciting novel, so Alice digs out her gamebook and looks up the different ways that chess pieces move. From that, she determines that they've been upgraded to rooks based solely upon the signposts. But this isn't exactly helping them to pick a direction. Willow randomly gets angry and starts yelling at both Alice and Sophia. Her anger kind of comes out of nowhere, and it takes the other girls by surprise. Then, without warning, Sophia yells out and knocks Alice to the ground. Willow limps away, and Alice sees that she has a violent bite on the back of her leg that tore through the cloth and took out the flesh as well. All around them are these scary-looking flower creatures that Sophia identifies as Malmay rats. Sophia says that she'll use her plant powers to distract them long enough for Alice to help Willow get away. Alice runs over to Willow, puts her onto her back, and carries her away from there as fast as she can go. After a while, Elsa apologizes for her tantrum earlier. She explains that she often feels like she isn't good enough for anything. The first step is acknowledging that you have a problem. Willow is also apologetic, but her ire is chalked up to having been bitten by the Malmay rats. Willow has never been one to shy away from the tough stuff, but one look at her closed eyes tells me a blood wound is not her injury of choice. What an odd way to put things. I think that in comparison to not being injured at all, Willow would prefer no injury. Alice claims that she had basic first aid training in her normal school, but goes on to describe the act of putting a band-aid over a paper cut, which, that's not first aid, babe. If you don't know how to even wrap a wound, then what you learned was, I dare say, a waste of everybody's freaking time. On Willow's Wonder Vision, her last heart is blinking as she dies. Alice tries to give her one of her spare lives, but the program won't let her, so the best she can do is to wrap some cloth around it and basically hope for the best. Willow stands but then crumples to the ground. She's breathing but non-responsive. All out of options, Alice decides to pour Maddie's mystery tea down Willow's throat. Hey man, Willow is dead regardless of what's in there, so I guess. However, it was a 100% health potion that almost immediately not only revives Willow, but also instantly heals her leg back to perfection. How convenient. Alice tells Willow to stay there while she doubles back to try and find Sophia. However, when she gets back to the crossroads, she finds no sign of Sophia, so Alice goes back to where she left Willow, only to find that Willow is also now gone. Square 2. The Night. At this point, I don't even know why I'm so surprised that we're in part 2, even though nothing of actual value happened. Alice wandered around, had some visions, and then wandered some more. Thrilling stuff, really. Chapter 10. We're back over to Chess, who is still without his memories. He sits in confusion in the train car with Buckley and watches as the man unfolds a newspaper. There's a riddle on the front page, which is practically copy-pasted from Riddles 101. Zero effort was put into this. Anyway, the answer is time, which has been the theme this train. Even the train attendant is literally a walking clock. Chess blurts out the answer, and the train stops. Chess suddenly remembers everything and knows that he has to grab Stark and get out of there. That if it was Maddie who had come across Kit, he'd expect for Maddie to do the same thing. So he grabs Stark, who slowly begins to remember, and the two of them race in the direction Buckley points them into. However, when they get to the end of the train, the door is locked. Stark, now in full command of his actual memories, says that he's tried everything to get off of the train. He asks Chess how long that he's been stuck there and is kind of startled when Chess says that it's been a year. Since the door is locked, they decide to try something else. They race to the train and end up in the place where Chess jumped onto the train. As they're going, Stark says that the phrase, "time flies, but never stops." It's at this point that Chess realizes that the train has stopped on a bridge and they're hundreds of feet above a lake. At that height, the water would be like hitting cement, and if the fall didn't kill you, you'd likely be knocked out and drowned. But Stark says something incredible. "We're not going to jump, we're going to fly." Which, sure, why not? Chapter 11. Alice wanders around calling out for Sophia and Willow. At first, she convinces herself that they'll pop out from the bushes and startle her. But the longer that they don't respond and the further she gets from the area, the more she realizes that she doesn't fear being alone, she fears abandonment. It gets cold, really cold, like winter snowstorm levels of cold. She starts looking around to find shelter and wishes that she can find another looking glass simply so that she can escape reality. Now, I would like to pause to speculate on if Alice is physically leaving reality or if it's something that's all in her head. After all, multiple times when a memory ended, she found herself in a more sleep-like position. So I feel like going into a magically induced sleep in a strange place in the middle of a snowstorm is probably not the best idea. After a while, a voice calls out to her and tells her to be calm and grabs her hand. The voice is familiar, so Alice asks if it's Chess. However, I think we all knew that it wouldn't be him since the last we saw of him, he was on the train. Instead, the owner of the voice is wounded that they always confuse him for his brother. That's right, it's Kit. Alice isn't sure if he's real or not, but she's determined to hold on to Kit if only for Chess's sake. They go down to the ocean where there's nowhere else to go unless you get into the water. Kit then goes down to the waves and Alice calls to him not to leave. Kit says something that reminds Alice a little too much of Chess and wonders if it's normal for siblings to be so alike. Siblings sound alike, don't they? Not that I would know. Charlotte and I are as opposite as night and day, as red and white. Except that if she wanted to keep up the metaphor of opposites, she would use green or black as polar opposites of red or white. Let's file this under the author desperately trying to hammer in more Alice in Wonderland references without actually understanding a single thing about them, and move on though. The only consolation to this is that at least Alice now acknowledges that Charlotte isn't actually her sister, so they wouldn't be as in sync as actual siblings. Alice calls out the Kit still in the water and asks if he's real. He's like, "Come and find out," and dives under. When he doesn't resurface after too much time has passed, Alice dives in to find him, but finds herself in an unusual place. Kit encourages her to relax and to let it examine her. As Alice is dragged under, with no mention about not being able to breathe or anything, memories of plot-relevant things pop up in bubbles. Eventually, those things go beyond the start of the first book and get into the territory of Alice's lost childhood memories. When she reaches the bottom of the underwater cavern, I realize that this is supposed to be a Little Mermaid-themed version of Alice's tumble down the rabbit hole. She lands nicely at the bottom, not like she'd been tumbling down a rock chute a moment earlier. She looks around, wondering if Kit is going to join her or if he was simply yet another plot device to get her into position. Because God forbid that Alice be allowed to be smart enough to figure out what her next step needs to be on her own. Ugh. Alice is drawn down a connecting tunnel and finds herself in an atrium. There she meets up with Kit again, who explains that this was the Wabe, or the way between the two Wonderlands. Alice is obviously quite excited about that, but she also wants to know what happened to Sophia and Willow. Kit tells her to slow down and offers her food. Since this entire time, Alice has been complaining about not having anything to eat. She obviously takes him up on this offer. Kit eagerly shows her a tree that he says is a tom-tom tree that they were able to grow in this place with the help of Catherine's research. Alice eats the fruit from this tree, and it's basically lambas bread in the form of fruit. Kit explains that it's a solution to world hunger, but that the taste of the fruit varies from person to person. Now that she is no longer hungry, she turns to the question of where they are. Kit tries to explain to her that this is like a hidden level in a video game, but in a world where fun is outlawed, Alice has never actually played video games before. However, this is more for the benefit of the readers than anything. He goes on to explain that nobody can track her Wonder Vision here, which brings back Alice's doubts that this is actually Kit. He explains that they're easy to hack, even going so far as to convince people that they're being touched. The person on the beach was a hologram/illusion, and that this is the actual Kit. Kit takes her further inside where she's surprised to see Nave. Nave explains to her that this is something called the EGG, or Extraordinary Gamers Guild. This reminds Alice that Chess had mentioned that her mastery was games, and as such, they're sure that she'll fit right in. But first, they go into another room where Alice collapses onto a chair. Kit says that the other girl is still resting, which makes Alice question who is also here. She gets excited when Nave tells her that it's Willow, but that she's in the hospital wing. This makes Alice remember how much that she doesn't trust Nave, but she does nothing with any of this info. Kit makes her some calming tea and explains that Lavender Hatter taught him how, that Maddie's mom and his own mom used to be quite close. Nave says that Kit might be able to try and help Alice fill in some of her memory gaps. The first thing Alice does is to ask about Catherine, but both boys were hoping that she'd be able to answer some questions about that. Alice knows that she's not going to get solid answers until after this tour is over, so she tells Kit to lead the way. Chapter 12. As Chess falls on the train, he thinks about his life up until this point. Well, he tells us that he tries not to think about his abusive father, and in doing so, thinks about his father, and that he'd rather focus on stuff like his kiss with Alice. Ugh. Anyway, he lands in the water, but after a moment, Stark comes and pulls him out. Apparently, we're now working from Looney Tunes logic, in that if you look down, you fall. Stark didn't look down, and he landed on the bank. Chess fell into the water because he's a moron. Except that the only reason why he isn't dead is because he's the author darling. Never for a second did I think that he was going to die, because he's the point of view character in several more chapters following this. The moment when your own chapter headers spoil the story. The two of them press on, since there's nothing else to do except that. As they go, they briefly talk about how they used to play together as children. That is, until their conversation turns towards the sad. Apparently their mothers died at the same time in the same sort of car accident, but Chess obviously doesn't want to talk about that. They get to a fork in the road where Chess decides to pick a fight. He implies that since Stark is a diamond, that he doesn't want to do the actual work, even if said work is literally climbing up a hill. A hill. He argues that the sooner that they can get out of here, the sooner Stark can go back to his literal mansion and keep pretending like this is actually Wonderland. But he drops that bombshell and refuses to explain himself to the boy who has been out of commission for the past year. Then a knight shows up and Chess passes out from a pain to the back of his head. When he wakes up, he finds Maddie standing over him. She's upset that Alice isn't with him, but is grateful that her missing brother was found. As Chess fully wakes up, he realizes that they're in a prison cell, one that Maddie explains cuts off the Wonder Gene so that they can't get out. Also, Jack is there, if that's important. Chess wonders out loud if this is the other checkpoint Buckley mentioned earlier, but according to Maddie, this is her first one, so Chess settles in to explain what's been going on with him. Thanks for listening to my Book Snark on YouTube. New videos are up every Monday, but stick around because I sometimes drop random videos on other days too. Just as a reminder, even if you can't financially support me, there are other ways to help me out. The first is watching this video as well as all my other videos. It's also important to like and subscribe. Finally, you can share this video with all of your friends so that they can help as well. If you're already caught up with all of my videos, you can go to Tumblr for my main book Snarks, always free and updated every morning. Newly added to Patreon is to become a member without paying. You'll get access to the same thing as Tumblr, but on Patreon. Supporters can have access to so many more book Snarks starting at $1 a month. Also new is a 1-week free Patreon trial, so be sure to check that out. Special thanks to Dawn, Phoebe, and Nikki for supporting me on Patreon already. If you want to hear your name in my video next week, either support me on Patreon or make a one-time donation. Do you like my Snark so much that you want me to snark your writing? I do that too. For just $6 per chapter, I will tell you how awful that your writing is. But not to worry if you feel like you couldn't take the criticism. I also offer regular book editing as well, just $10 per chapter. You can contact me on any of my social media platforms if you have further questions. If you want to read some of the things that I've written, you can purchase my works on Amazon. I have a slew of spicy short stories and 2 full-length novels. I also frequently run flash tales on my stories, so if you don't follow me on any social media, you might want to do so just so you can know when I might be offering things for free. Links for everything will be posted below. See you next week, guys!